Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving straight into a fascinating and honestly kind of alarming intelligence brief from Onlyounesse. The report we're looking at makes a massive claim. The architecture of global power is currently undergoing a complete structural inversion. Basically, it's shifting away from administrative policies and financial engineering and moving right back to raw physical materials. We're going to explore exactly why the authors of this brief think the modern illusion of endless cheap physical inputs is, well, starting to shatter.
All right, look at this quote the report highlights. The global system remains fundamentally stable, anchored by administrative monetary policy. All right, we hear this a lot from the mainstream consensus, don't we? This idea that a simple quarter-point interest rate cut is going to magically heal the structural deficits of the physical world. But the Onlyounnesse's analysis, they argue this is a highly dangerous assumption. Treating financial spreadsheets like they can literally dictate terms to the Earth's crust, according to the brief, that is fundamentally flawed. So the core argument here sets up a massive collision: institutional paper leverage versus physical reality. For decades, Western financial hubs have operated under this idea that controlling the currency means, controlling the world. Just issue bonds, leverage institutional debt, and import all the physical goods you need. But as the report bluntly points out, administrative fiat just cannot dictate terms to physical reality. It doesn't matter how pretty your sovereign bonds look on a spreadsheet, you literally can't eat them, and you absolutely can't use them to power a lithium-ion grid.
Section 1. The Sovereign Debt Pyramid, Fiat Illusions, and Structural Realities.
Okay, let's dismantle the first pillar the report looks at, the global sovereign debt architecture. When you look at this macroeconomic breakdown, the contrast is just stark. On the left, the brief characterizes the Western fiat structure as highly inflationary, completely paper-backed, and honestly, suffocatingly debt-heavy. But look over on the right. See the shift? The Eastern and Global South models are fundamentally restructured to prioritize physical hoarding over financial engineering. The analysis points out that while Western central banks are caught in this endless loop of interest rate manipulation, these other regions are systematically securing the actual, physical molecules required to sustain human civilization.
And that brings us to the key takeaway from the analysis. You cannot print structural leverage. I mean, sure, you can update a digital ledger to just poof $1 trillion of fiat currency into existence, but you cannot print a single ounce of cobalt. You can't print a metric ton of wheat. Financial leverage, the brief argues, just becomes a fragile house of cards when it's totally decoupled from the actual physical assets that underwrite our survival.
Moving on to Section 2, Physical Chokeholds. Sovereign autonomy over raw assets. This brings us right down to the dirt, literally. The brief defines sovereign autonomy as the total geopolitical leverage achieved through absolute state control over localized raw minerals and maritime transit. The argument here is super interesting. We all have to focus on who designs the best microchip or the sleekest software, right? But the report says we completely ignore who actually owns the underlying structural pipeline, relying on external maritime straits or foreign mines. In this view, that makes an economy incredibly vulnerable to sudden supply shocks.
Now here is where the data gets genuinely wild. Beyond the usual suspects like lithium and rare earths, the report points to a massive, totally underdiscussed chokehold: the global soil inversion and the fertilizer superaxis. We are talking about NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Without these, global crop yields absolutely plummet. Just look at the data here. Morocco alone holds 68% of the world's known phosphate reserves. To put that into perspective, that creates a massive structural dependency for the West on an Eastern and Global South superaxis just for the very elements required to grow food.
So if you're looking at global supply chains, the report lays out these non-negotiable physical bottlenecks. You've got lithium concessions for your energy grids, cobalt for your batteries, rare earth monopolies for defense, and running silently underneath the whole shebang, that massive NPK fertilizer dependency keeping populations fed. Like the source material argues, AI models and software supremacy mean absolutely nothing if you physically cannot source the hardware minerals or the phosphate required to fertilize your soil.
Section 3. Demographic Realignments, the Industrial Labor Gap.
Transitioning to the final pillar. The data we're looking at exposes what the report calls a fundamental shift in global production dynamics. Check this out. On one side, you have these collapsing, aging demographic pyramids in traditional Western and East Asian industrial hubs. But on the other side, there's an exploding youth boom happening entirely outside those legacy hubs. It's largely concentrated in the Global South, which not coincidentally is exactly where all those raw physical resources and phosphate reserves happen to be located. The physical labor required is literally geographically separating from the nations that currently hold the financial leverage.
This leads right into what the report calls the software automation illusion versus the physical labor deficit. There's this really widespread belief right now that software automation, language models, and AI can just seamlessly plug massive gaps in heavy industry. But the analysis completely deconstructs this. They argue you simply cannot prompt engineer a supply chain into existence if the workforce required to physically operate the machinery or mine the potash just isn't there in your demographic pyramid.
Code cannot pour concrete. Actually, let's just let that sink in for a second. Code cannot pour concrete, at least not until we get some incredibly advanced robots. Until then, the report notes that physical labor realities still fundamentally outweigh administrative software solutions. We're entering an era where, according to the brief, the people who actually work the dirt hold significantly more intrinsic macro value than the people who manipulate the spreadsheets.
Section 4. Tactical synthesis. Unifying the macro signal.
All right, let's tie it all together. According to the intelligence brief, here is how a systemic shatter triggers simultaneously across 3 distinct steps. Step 1. Institutional fiat structures buckle under the weight of their own debt, completely unable to print their way out of physical shortages. Step 2. Sovereign mineral chokeholds tighten, with the fertilizer superaxis and Eastern monopolies restricting key exports. And Step 3. Aging demographic labor gaps compound the physical deficit, making reshoring nearly impossible. The report suggests that if these 3 anomalies trigger all at once, the paper-backed global system just seizes up.
So look closely at the supply chains, look at your food, look at your energy grid, and ask yourself this cold, unanswerable reality posed by the brief. Who really holds the leverage when the paper burns? Is it the central banker managing a fiat deficit? Or is it the sovereign state sitting on 68% of the global phosphate supply, with a monopoly on the raw minerals that power the entire modern world?
Which brings us to the close of our explainer on this Onlyounesse intelligence brief. It leaves us with a pretty sobering quote. This is Onlyounesse. We provide intelligence, not news aggregation. Stay sharp. See you tomorrow.